This is Shah from the podcast Thrive Not Survive After Child Abuse with episode number 73. Yesterday we talked about how you actually should learn a couple of things so that it actually can prevent that the relationship that you are in, ends early or you go through a lot of trouble. So go back to that podcast and we go a little bit further in one of the topics, and that is child abuse typically don't want to tell about their story. And it's maybe not they don't want to tell about the story, it is often that they cannot talk about the story, and sometimes they start to believe it's so long ago, I want to keep it a secret, I have shame, I have all these kind of things. We call these things limiting beliefs. But here is the thing, right? There is there are actually a couple of really good reasons why you should actually tell the story. So hear me out, right? This is the reason why you should tell the story. Now let's repeat first a little bit how it normally happens with most child abuse victims, right? The average person that actually decides, or sometimes it is the circumstances that brings the person to talk about their abuse, is 19 years. Talk about abuse 19 years after the fact. So I told yesterday the big part of my abuse ended when I was like 12 years old. I'm sorry, and 19 years later I would have been in my 30s, and that's exactly when I started to talk about my abuse for the first time. So that's a long time, and it's only 1/3, and it's an estimate. That is probably a low estimate of the child abuse victims is actually talk, in general about it. Most people don't even talk about it, right? They just keep it a secret forever and ever. So I called my book Broken Silence because I broke the silence at some point in time. And it's not only to write a book, by the way, that's just partly for me, and the rest I'm going to tell you about in this podcast. Telling the story, and if you do it in a certain way, has a huge healing factor, to use that word, of your abuse. To overcome your abuse, one part of that really helps is actually knowing how to tell your story. And it goes in 5 phases. I explain it all in my book Broken Silence, but it helps you heal from and overcome sexual abuse. Telling about your abuse also helps your spouse, your partner, the people that are in your close circle, to sometimes understand that your behavior might not be what you actually want it to be. You might express emotions um, a little bit more stronger than actually the situation may be warrant for. You might have mood swings that are not so easy to understand why. You might even get depressed or are depressed, or you have huge anxiety, and you might not even know why that is, but it's often very related to the abuse. Telling about your abuse, um, I'm not saying that takes everything away, but it helps a lot. It helps a lot. So that's one side. So if you don't do it for yourself, you can at least do it for someone else, right? Because it's important that you maintain and have an open relationship. That is for your spouse. It's even with your children, if you have some, and definitely all the people actually around you. I'm not saying you have to put it in a book or write it on Facebook, put it on social media. I'm not talking about these things at all. I'm just saying, hey, and if you do it in a structured way, and like I said, I give a good framework in my book how to do that, then that's one reason. Right? Later on in the podcast, I'll also let you know other ways to start telling your story and why that's important, right? For you. The second reason why you should not keep it a secret is actually, who are you actually protecting? Let's be honest, right? You were a child, you were abused. If you don't talk about your abuser, who are you actually protecting? I'll give you a minute to think about it, but yeah, it's exactly right. Your abuser, you protect actually your abuser, and it's exactly what they are counting on, right? Now that you cannot immediately tell it when you were a kid, there are enough reasons for that. I've addressed that in earlier podcasts, and I'm sure I will address that more. But later on, if in my case my abuser was still alive, what what was on my mind quite often is the fact that I'm not telling it. I started to feel guilty not telling it because maybe he continues the actions that he did. For a long time I thought I'm the only one, which is of course pretty naive if you think about it. When I started to tell it, it's actually not because I started it. It's when my partner at that time came home and she had some sort of an event, some sort of a gathering with friends, and my sister was part of the group, and it were all women, and the women were talking about harassment and abuse, and every woman in the group had a story. Can you imagine? Every single woman had a story, and so everyone started to tell the story. For most of these women, it was for the first time, and so that's where my partner heard from my sister, who was also part of that group, that she was abused by her uncle. And that's when my partner remembered that I had a similar behavior and thought, and she asked me about it, and that's the first time that I really told her everything that happened. But strangely enough, that was also the first time that I found out that my sister was abused by the same man, and later on other siblings as well. So by keeping it a secret, maybe in our family it was a little bit too late. But who knows what he has done more. We always kept it a secret, strange as that was, until after he died and after he passed away. So in all honesty, it never gave me a really good feeling, right? It's actually we were protecting the wrong people. We're not protecting me. At some point in time, actually, I was thinking that I would protect my parents because it would give them so much grief and pain if they would find out. But we are actually protecting the wrong people. Right? We should have not do that. Now we protected actually the abuser. So that's the other reason why you should start finding a way to come forward. And it's not easy, right? This is one of the hardest things to do, but think about it. I called my story Broken Silence because we need to break that silence, people, because a lot of people are not aware what the impact is of the abuse and what the magnitude it is in our society. The number is just crazy high, right? And it's too late for me. I mean, it has already happened to me. But by not telling it, maybe I also cause that other younger people go through the same situation. So yes, it's hard to tell, but let's take responsibility here and come forward. That's my call out to you. And I'm going to organize special sessions where we can talk about these things in a closed group, help you bit by bit to tell your story. You choose your own public. Maybe it's only to yourself in the mirror. Maybe you want to record it in a journal. Maybe you just want to start to talk about it with your spouse. And maybe you want to take it even to another level. We can talk about these things. Write me a personal message or drop me an email at jean@jeandorfcoaching.com, jean@jeandorfcoaching.com, or just react to this podcast or any podcast that you listen. Find me on Facebook, and very soon we do sessions with people that only get invited, so it's safe, and we can talk about how we can do that. So that's becoming my mission, because I believe that if I tell my story, there's one less story to tell, right? If I tell my story, then there is one less story to tell. Okay, this was Jean from the podcast Thrive Not Survive After Child Abuse. I hope to hear you back tomorrow with another episode of this podcast. Bye-bye.